welcome back to another episode of Tech Pro Unicorn Podcast. I am your host, Michael Grace, and today I am joined by Michelle Seiler Tucker, and she is the founder and CEO of Seiler Tucker Incorporated. She holds the M&AMI Mergers and Acquisitions Master Intermediary title, as well as Certified Mergers and Acquisitions Professional, the CM&AP. She's also a Certified Business Analyst, the CSBA title. Michelle also owns many other businesses in several different industries. As a 20-year veteran in the mergers and acquisitions industry, she is regarded as the leading authority on buying, selling, fixing, and growing businesses. Her and her firm have sold over 1,000 businesses in almost every vertical and have a remarkable track record of success. In addition to all of this, Michelle has been featured in Inc., Forbes, Entrepreneur Magazine, and USA Magazine. Michelle is an international keynote speaker and makes regular radio and TV appearances on Fox Business News, CNBC. She has also spoken alongside many prominent speakers, such as Eric Trump, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Kathy Ireland, Donna Karen, Stedman Graham, Randi Zuckerberg, and Steve Wozniak. She is a best-selling author of two really cool books. One is Sell Your Business for More Than It's Worth, and has a new book just out called Exit Rich, which is a Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller. She's also a fellow podcast host, and she hosts the Exit Rich podcast. Michelle, thank you for taking the time and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me here. Thanks,
Awesome.
Michael.
Absolutely. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about yourself before we dive into the juicy details of mergers and acquisitions?
What would you like to know?
I love it. I love it. There's many folks, want to know how do folks build a business such as this? How did Michelle get to where she is, owning her own firm, a woman leader, a CEO of her own company? Maybe you could tell us about your rise to success.
Sure. So I've always, I always knew as a little girl that I didn't want to work for anyone, because I would tell my mom all the time, I'm not going to work for anyone, because number one, I don't like to be told what to do. It's my biggest pet peeve. Don't tell me what to do. So I always told I would be my own boss. And I've owned, many small companies in different verticals. I did end up getting a job, that 3-letter word job with a Xerox Corporation. Xerox actually recruited me into high volume sales. And within 6 months, my name became the closer at Xerox. So every time somebody couldn't close a deal, they're like, get Michelle. She's a closer. She'll close it. She closes everything. And then I was promoted within 6 months at Xerox to regional vice president over 100 salespeople. And I realized very quickly I didn't like it. And the reason I didn't like it is because I'm a people person. I love to connect with people. I hate paper. I love people. I love to connect with people. I like to find out what their issues are, what their problems are. I'm a problem solver. I like to get things done. And in corporate America, it's very difficult to get things done because there's so much red tape. There's so much bureaucracy that we have to go through. And it's very difficult. And at Xerox, they were scheduling meetings to schedule more meetings, to schedule follow-up meetings on those meetings. And it was just managing paper versus really managing people. And it really wasn't connecting with our audience anymore. So I wasn't, I love building relationships that last a lifetime. I love solving problems. And I wasn't able to build relationships and solve problems because I was too busy, coordinating meetings. And that's when I decided to leave Xerox and transition into my franchise sales. So I started my own franchise sales, franchise consulting, and franchise partnership business. And I did that for several years. But I had so many buyers that kept coming to me asking for existing businesses. And they didn't want the franchise model. And we didn't really have any. So I kept saying no, no, no. And one day I'm like, why am I saying no? I should be saying yes. And that's really how I transitioned into franchising, into mergers and acquisitions and selling companies. It was that easy. So, and I didn't just transition into selling companies. I transitioned into selling them, buying them, flipping them, fixing them, We partner with business owners, investing my capital, my core competencies, my time, energies, and efforts to put those businesses on a road to sell program. Because so many businesses go out of business and so many businesses don't sell, it's heartbreaking for me. So I don't just sell companies, I also fix them, I grow them, I build them, I put them on a road to sell map.
I love it. And that path sounds just so, when you say it, it sounds so logical. It sounds like it was just the natural evolution of where the course took you, which is awesome. So in your company and helping businesses, I can't say that every business starts with the aim to sell, but many do. They grow to a point when they're interested in selling. You guys have put together lots of advice. Your podcast is full of tips and guides and lots of knowledge. You have the 6 Ps, which are how to build a sustainable, scalable, and sellable business. Could you maybe talk a little bit about what those are?
Sure. And the reason, I wrote Exit Rich and really defined the 6P model in my book, Exit Rich, is because what Steve Forbes says is true. There's 30.2 million businesses in the United States. 40% will be up for sale at any given time. Steve Forbes says 80% of businesses on the market will never sell. So 80% will never sell. That's a huge wake-up call for business owners, because that means you have less than a 20% chance of success. And, doing this for over the last 20 years, selling as many businesses and franchises as we have, I've learned why businesses sell and why businesses don't sell. And one of the biggest common denominators is really operating, functioning on all 6 cylinders, all 6 Ps. I call this the infrastructure of your business. It's the engine of your company. And it's kind of like when you go build a house, Michael. If your contractor doesn't lay the proper foundation, doesn't dig deep, doesn't put in all the piping, all the insulation, wiring, etc., one big wind comes across, your house is going to blow down, right? Same thing with a business. You need a solid infrastructure. And so the 6 Ps are people. Number one is people. One of the biggest mistakes, I'm going to kind of talk about the biggest mistakes business owners make when I talk about the 6 Ps, because they are intertwined. One of the biggest mistakes that business owners make and why businesses aren't sellable is because business owners have built themselves a glorified job that they go to work at every day versus a business that works for them. Business owners are working in their business, not on their business. You really need to, you don't grow a business, you grow people, and people build the business. So you gotta grow people. You gotta get the right people in the right seats. This is why we call it people, the right people in the right seats. You gotta ask the who question, Michael. Who opens the door? Who answers the phone? Who handles customer service, marketing, logistics, quality control, insurance, legal, environmental? That the clue here is that Michael should never be next to the who, because we're trying to build the business without you. And the number one reason that businesses are not sellable is because when I take that owner out of the business, there is no business. And this is true of large
Makes
businesses
sense.
too. We're selling a $55 million company right now. And this $55 million company, we're having to sell a percentage of it because they can't pull the owner out of it. It's too dependent upon the owner. Even though they have 350 employees, everything is connected to the owner. So people is huge. The second P is product. And product is your product, your service, your industry. You have to ask yourself, is your product, your industry, your service on the way up or on the way out? When I wrote my very first book, Sell Your Business for More Than It's Worth, in 2013, I did the research and learned that 98% of all startups will go out of business, right? We all know that within 1 to 5 years. But then when I wrote Exit Rich in 2019, I did the exact same research and learned that the business landscape has flip-flopped. Now, only 30% of startups will go out of business, only 30%. But out of 27.6 million companies in the United States, those businesses that have been in business 10 years or longer, 70% of them are going out of business. 70. And that reason is because business owners stop innovating. They do what I call lack of aim, lack of innovation and marketing. Always innovate and market. Always aim. And so you have to ask yourself, is your product, your industry, your service on the way up or on the way out? Do you have an Amazon? If you have an Amazon, Michael, that's when you sell, because that's when you're in your prime. No pun intended, but that's when you're in your prime. Or do you have a Blockbuster and they're about to go out of business? So innovation and marketing is key to staying relevant in the mind of the consumer, because consumers are not loyal anymore. Whoever makes it easiest for the consumer to do business with you is the company that's winning. I mean, Amazon makes it practically so easy to buy. You can practically buy a horse on Amazon and have it delivered in 2 days. So they make it easy for the consumer to do business with them. So you really have to innovate and market and ask yourself, what do the consumers want? Whoever makes it easiest for them to do business is the company that's winning. And then the next P is processes. Processes are kind of like exit strategy. And business owners don't think about it until something bad happens in their business. They're like, oh, we need a process for that. Well, processes really need to be defined. They're your infrastructure in your business. You can't grow a sustainable, scalable business without processes. And a lot of business owners get this wrong because they will structure their processes around the owner's agenda, meaning medical doctors. What are their hours? Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. When do we all work? Monday through Friday, 9 to 10,
Yeah.
right? And so I always tell consumers, business owners, go back and ask yourself, what are the 3 things you want your customers to experience? McDonald's did this back in the 70s. And they said, we want our customers, our consumers, to experience great tasting food that's hot and fast. Actually, they did this back in the 40s, not the 70s. And you can eat at McDonald's anywhere in the world and get the same experience, right? So you need to figure out what you want your customers to experience and develop your processes around the customer experience, not around your own agenda. Because if we don't create wow experiences for our customers are going to go somewhere else. And then the 4th P is proprietary. Now, this is the highest value driver. This proprietary can take you from a 4 multiple to 6 to an 8 to 10 to 15 to 20. With tech companies, most businesses trade on a multiple of adjusted EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. If you're a tech company, you're going to trade for a multiple of revenues. Sometimes we get those unicorn businesses in, kind of like Facebook. Facebook paid, $16 billion for WhatsApp, and WhatsApp was hemorrhaging money, but they had 1 billion users. So proprietary is your proprietary assets. Number 1 is branding. The more well branded you are, the more I can sell your company for, as long as your brand is relevant in the mind of the consumers. Is anybody going to buy Blockbuster? No. But the most valuable brand in the world is Apple, worth over $389 billion. So build your brand. Trademarks are very valuable, but most business owners make this mistake. They go to GoDaddy, they plug in the name that they're thinking of to name their company. They get the .com, then they go to their state and they get a local trademark, but they never check the federal database to make sure that trademark is available. So you want to make sure and get a federal trademark. If you're doing business around the world, you want a global trademark, because I've seen businesses in business 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They receive a cease and desist letter and they have to stop using that company name. Also, make sure you get your slogans trademarked, your podcast trademark. I've had podcast hosts go out of business because they didn't own the federal rights to that podcast's name. And then products too. We're selling a company that has 12 different products. Each one has a federal trademark. Each one is exclusive into a Walmart, to TJ Maxx, to a Target. And then patents are huge. If you've ever watched Shark Tank, what does every shark always ask? Do you have a patent on that? Do you have a pending? Do you have a patent pending? We once sold a company for $18 million that really wasn't making much money, but they had 18 patents. Contracts are also extremely valuable. Contracts with manufacturers, vendors, distributors. Client contracts are the most valuable of all, but here's another mistake business owners make. 98% of all sales are asset sales, not stock sales. If you don't have that transferability clause in your contract and your deal is an asset sale and your buyer refuses to do a stock sale, then you're going to have to go to your clients and ask them to sign a consent to transfer. If they don't sign it, your deal is dead in the water. Plus, we got clients that have 100 clients, 200 clients, 1,000 clients. Are you going to go to all of your customers and get them to sign that that consent to transfer. And then what if the deal doesn't close? Now all your customers know your business is for sale. So you got to be proactive and get that transferability language. Also, make sure you hold all of your IP in a separate corporation. Your patents, your trademarks, all of your IP must be in a separate corporation, because if your corporation gets sued, you don't want to lose your IP. And then databases are huge. I mean, we just talked about Facebook paying $16 billion, I believe, for WhatsApp, and WhatsApp wasn't making any money. So databases are huge. Celebrity endorsements. We have a client that's got products in front of Oprah. Strategics will pay a lot more money for that, because everybody wants to get their products in front of the queen of everything. So I'll just give you a quick example. I mean, we had a client whose business we've sold for 165% more than what the business appraised for $9.8 million. We sold it for $15 million for 70% of the business, because they had customer concentration into BP. They had 75% of their business with BP. We bought 550 buyers to the table. We got 12 LOIs. All of the letter of intents had, clawback language and earnouts and all these different contingencies on the BP contract that our seller said, no, we're not doing that. So then I found a strategic buyer that had similar products and services and been trying to get into BP for decades. So we were able to, he was willing to outbid everybody else and pay $15 million for, like I said, 70% of the company. And that brings me to my next P, which is patrons. You want to make sure you have customer diversification, not customer concentration. Whenever you have more than 30, 40% tied up in one customer, buyers get very nervous about that, and many buyers will not buy your business. So you have to make sure that you have customer diversification. And then the last P, the most important P to all of your listeners, is profits. We're all in this game to make money. We're not in this game to lose money. But I always say lack of profits is always a symptom, never the problem. Lack of profits is a symptom of not running on one of the other 5 Ps. If you got a people issue, you're not going to be profitable. If you got a process problem and your processes are inefficient, you're not going to be as profitable. If you're not watching your money and somebody's embezzling from you, you're not going to be as profitable. And I think it's 2 out of 5 business owners get embezzled every year.
Wow.
So those are your 6 Ps. Those are the infrastructure that you must build your business on.
I love it. That's for those of you that are listening to the podcast and not able to see the video, I filled up a whole page of notes just from what Michelle just laid down, which is a ton of knowledge. I appreciate you being just out there with the knowledge, right, and helping folks. Lots of I guess it's almost like an obstacle course, right? There's just lots of things to remember, lots of things to I thought you had a great point about taking your intellectual property and putting it, in a separate corporation. I haven't heard that in a really long time. And it was like, wow, that's a great reminder of how you set up your corporation structure. It isn't as simple as, just go open an LLC and now you're a business.
Yeah, no, you need, the other mistake that a lot of business owners make is they'll open up an LLC and then they'll have the real estate in their personal name. So if somebody falls on your property, your commercial real estate, you're going to get sued personally. So you really got to figure out how to not pierce the corporate bells. And, there's companies that have their equipment in one corporation. They have their trucks in one corporation, they have their IP in one corporation. That's how it should be set up.
I love it. So there's just with your just vast experience of bringing buyers and sellers together, probably sometimes, representing both sides, the sanity check, right? There's a seller's sanity check and a buyer's sanity check. What is that? I mean, there's a lot to evaluate when you're either buying or considering selling a business.
Yeah. So on selling a business, it's I want to say it's chapter 2 or 3 in my book, Exit Rich. And the reason I focus so much on what is the best time to sell, when should you sell, what is a seller sanity check, is because so many sellers will back out of a deal because of seller's remorse. So we try to figure out, what's the most important thing on the sell side from the beginning, so they're not going to have seller's remorse set in. So we take them through different exercises that we talk about in Exit Rich. And we also ask them, what's the most important thing to you? It's not always money. A lot of times it is. And a lot of times they just don't know. They'll say, look, I want $20 million from my company because that's what I need to live on for the next, 15, 20 years. And they don't understand about how DST work, deferred sales trust work. They don't understand that it's not what you get, it's what you keep. And so we really take them through a series of exercises about, how long you're going to live, how much money do you need per month, how much money do you need per year. Is it most important for you to get a cash exit out of the business, how much money you're getting, or is it more important for your clients to be taken care of, your employees to be taken care of, your legacy to continue to grow? Do you really want to sell 100% and then just leave, or do you want to sell, 60%, 70%, or 80%? And then what are you going to do next? So the seller sanity check is just figuring out what are your top 5. What's the most important thing to you? Is it how much you walk away with, or is it your employees being taken care of? I had a client tell me, it's not about what I walk away with. It's how much my employees can get out of the sale of the company, and can the employees stay on for so many years. So we really took our clients through that exercise. And then we want to find out, we really want the client to identify, the seller to identify, what are they going to do next? Because selling a business is like husband and wife. All the children move out. All the children move out. They go to college. So a husband and wife look at each other and go, now what? Now what? Now we have to talk to each other. And you see a lot of couples actually get divorced once the kids go to college. So we want the seller, the business owner, to define what are they going to do next. And I'll give you a clear example that we have in my book, Exit Rich. We had 2 owners of a machine manufacturing company, and I bought them 2 LOIs, 2 letter of intents that met and exceeded their expectations. But they nitpicked to each one and found a reason not to accept either. So I said, listen, I'm taking the business off the market until you two figure out what you want to do after we sell the company. Because seller's remorse kept coming back. And they thought about it, and I think they called me like a month later, and they said, look, we were always excited and passionate about bed and breakfasts. They were high school sweethearts. They used to travel with their families to different bed and breakfasts all over the country. And I said, we want to start to buy a bed and breakfast with the proceeds. And guess what? The very next offer I bought them, they signed it, they left, they started their own, I think they bought a B&B. So the seller sanity is really knowing what you want to do next and what's the most important points of a sell. What's the most important thing for you to accomplish?
I love it. The my father-in-law has 20, I think he's at 23 patents right now in the gaming industry. He's 70 years old. He has a great model, and we're like, hey, you're 70 years old, like you should sell and do something for yourself. And he just looked at us and he was like, this is for myself. Like, I love my business. I love what I do. Like, what am I going to do? Like, sit on the farm and like in a rocker? He was like, I'm going to go till I'm not here anymore, and it was,
well, everybody's
awesome.
Perspective is different. I mean, if you hear, Donald Trump, love him or hate him, he always says to retire is to expire. But then you've got other people who say, I don't want to keep doing this. I don't want my life to be running this business. I want to travel. I want to see the world. I want to spend time with my grandkids. And that's why the seller sanity is so important. It's to really get crystal clear on what you want for the rest of your life. If it's running your business, then keep doing it. But just remember, businesses are not sustainable forever. There's hurricanes, there's this pandemic that closed a lot of industries down. So a lot of business owners try to sell when the business is doing terrible during a catastrophic event. That's the worst time to sell because you'll never maximize value. I want business owners to sell when they're in their prime.
I love it. Is there a flip side to that for the buyers? Things that the buyers should really be considering?
So there's 5 different types of buyers. So it depends on what type of buyer we're working with. If you're selling a small business, I would say under $5 million, most of your buyers are going to be first-time buyers. 98% of buyers are first-time buyers. Buyers are concerned with a lot of things. Buyers are concerned with making sure they get non-competes, maybe making sure they get training, making sure they get all intellectual property, making sure the employees are going to stay on. There's employment contracts, there's non-competes, there's some seller financing to help mitigate that risk. But all buyers, so there's first-time buyers, or 98% of buyers are first-time buyers. They buy small businesses. And then the second type of buyers, turnaround specialists. They buy distressed assets. Then you have PEGs, private equity groups. Private equity groups buy based on platforms and add-ons. So if they want to get into food manufacturing, they won't even consider a food manufacturing business for less than $3 million in EBITDA. If they already have food manufacturing, they'll consider other ones under $1 million in EBITDA. And then you have strategic and competitors, the fourth type of buyer. They typically will pay the highest multiple because they're buying synergies. Like the gentleman that I told you about the BP contract to help catapult his current business to the next level. Then you have sophisticated entrepreneurs. These are serial entrepreneurs that chase EBITDA. They chase cash flow. So no matter what type of buyer you are, out of those 5 buyers, they all ask themselves 5 basic questions. This is called the buyer sanity check. Number 1, how much money do I have to put down? Because even if somebody has $1 billion, they're not using their billion, they're using somebody else's billion. So how much do I have to put down? Will the debt service of the business, how much do I have to put down? Number 1. Number 2, will the cash flow of the business pay the debt service? So let's say the cash flow is $1 million a year, but the debt service is going to be $700,000 a year. That doesn't leave much, right? So number 1, how much do I have to put down? Number 2, will the cash flow of the business support the debt service? Number 3, how much is left to live on afterwards? And number 4 is how soon can I get my ROI, my return on investment? Most buyers want it within, 2 to 3 years. If it's larger businesses, maybe 3 to 5 years. Small businesses, 1 to 2 years. And then number 5 is, does the business have potential? Does it have potential to grow? Nobody's buying Blockbuster right now because there's no potential there. A lot of business owners aren't buying restaurants right now because there's not a lot of potential there. So they look at the industry to say, is there potential? But a lot of sellers think they're going to get paid on potential. No, you're not going to get paid on the potential. Now, if you've been in business for let's say you've been in business 7 years, and you got solid 5-year projections showing that you are trending up, then that's potential that buyers can pretty much count on, bank on. Nothing's 100%. But let's say you've been in business 2 years, and you go, oh, there's all this potential out there. I just haven't went and done it yet. Well, buyers aren't going to pay twice. They're not going to pay you for the business and pay to go out there and obtain that potential. Nothing's free in life. You have to spend money to make money, right? So that's really the 5 questions that all buyers ask. That's the buyer sanity check. But everybody wants non-competes. Everybody wants training. Everybody wants assets free and clear. Everybody wants to make sure they get all the IP. Everybody wants to make sure that the employees are staying, all of that stuff.
It almost seems like you're in a position of being a matchmaker, right? You're exposed to these buyers that are like, hey, I want to buy this type of business. You're exposed to these sellers that are like, hey, I have this type of business, and here's what I want to do. How do you walk that line? Do you ever get an opportunity to kind of be the broker and represent both sides, or is it best that you represent the seller and are working on their behalf, kind of like in a real estate?
M&A, selling companies is nothing like selling real estate. Real estate, you got somebody that represents the seller selling the house. You got somebody that comes in and has the buyer. Very seldom do they handle the transition. And if they do, they have to get dual agency signed off on. For businesses, very seldom does a buyer bring in their own representative because it doesn't really work that way. They come in, yes, we're representing the seller, but we also have a fiduciary duty to the buyer to make sure that they're set up for success. If I have a seller that won't agree to non-compete, I'm not going to take that transaction because I know they're going to compete and they're going to set my buyer up for failure. If they're not going to include all the IP, intellectual property, then I know they're going to compete and set my client up for failure, the buyer up for failure. So we have a fiduciary duty to both sides, even though we represent the seller, but I would never set a buyer up for failure. Now, buyers on large businesses, typically 10 million and up, they have a team, or we have a team for them of attorneys and CPAs, trust advisors, etc. that works with them on the due diligence and everything else. But it's usually the advisor that's representing a transaction. And if there's real estate involved, then we get dual agency signed off on.
Okay. That's awesome. So, one of the points of this is to maximize the value. How do you do that? How do you create like this? I keep comparing to real estate, and I know that's not directly appropriate, but people are selling houses and they get in these bidding wars, and it drives the price up. And how do we do that when you're selling a company? How does
Very
someone go about
easily,
that?
very easily. But the way we do it is based upon the 6 Ps. It's based upon the synergies. So if we have a business that has, let's say we have a business, and we have many of them right now. Let's say we have a business that operates on all 6 Ps, and they have a tremendous amount of proprietary assets, and they have the management team in place, and they have the infrastructure, and they have all of that. Strategics will pay a lot more money for a celebrity endorsement by Oprah. They'll pay for that contract, that BP contract, right, that we talked about earlier. They're looking for synergies. They'll pay for a location. Let's say that they want to do business in Austin, Texas, and they're currently not in Austin. They'll pay for that location. They'll pay more money for that location and for that exposure. So there's lots of things that buyers will pay more for. They'll pay more for branding. They'll pay more for federal trademarks. They'll pay more for patents. They'll pay more for specific contracts. If you have an exclusive contract with a certain vendor and you're trying to get that vendor to work in your company, work with your company too, but you can't because of exclusivity, they'll pay more for that. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's identifying the synergies the strategic competitors and private equity groups are willing to pay more for. And then it's looking at what that infrastructure has. So let's say we have a manufacturing business and they have a distribution center. It's costing it's costing $10 million a year to run. We will go out and find another manufacturing company that has, and we've done this before, that has distribution all over the U.S. Because the first thing they can do is cut that $10 million distribution center out, increasing EBITDA from day one. So we want to find those buyers who, let's say somebody is in, growing avocados, but they want to get into growing other types of fruits and vegetables. It's an easy fit for them because it's already an up and growing business. Or let's say they're in a certain grocery store. Let's say they're in Walmart or Target or something like that. And that buyer has been trying to get in those stores for years and can't get their feet in the door. So they'll buy relationships, they'll buy customer base, they'll buy, like I said, contracts, celebrity endorsements, things of that nature.
I love it. Yeah, things that are kind of hidden gems. I mean,
they are hidden gems. That's why you have to have a good M&A advisor that knows how to uncover those hidden gems, because a lot of times sellers don't even know what they have. So in evaluating the business, we take our clients through the 6 Ps and say, hey, did you know you have this and this is worth a lot of money? And they don't even know it. And then it's our job to identify that needle in a haystack type of buyer that's willing to pay 65% more than what everybody else has offered, because that is going to catapult their business to the next level. It's just like I keep going back to Facebook. Facebook paid $16 billion for WhatsApp, and WhatsApp was hemorrhaging, but they had a synergy. They had 1 billion users, and Facebook knew they could monetize and they could get a return on that investment. That's what we're looking for when we evaluate businesses and we go to put them on the market.
I love it. When I did the introduction, I was like, wow, she has a lot of certifications. And after listening to you explain all of this, right, all the things you have to be aware of, all the things you have to consider, either when buying or selling, it all just makes sense, right? Your story makes sense, your business makes sense, the service you provide is really awesome. I mean, it's kind of a win-win, right? I mean, I think at the end of this transaction, the buyer gets a good business that they can prosper from. The seller gets a really fair and profitable price for their business. And, you must have a feeling of satisfaction of having to bend the broker between those two.
Yeah, we do. It's, it sounds easy as you just
really
articulated it, but it's a tough battle. Yeah. I mean, sometimes we go to the closing table and everybody's screaming and yelling at each other, and we try to, try to go back to what's important to both the buyer and seller and identify those and, negotiate from that standpoint to create a win-win.
I love it. Well, Michelle has both a company, right, which is out, and I'll have the links down below, SeilerTucker.com. You can also get her podcast out there or on all the other podcast channels. You can find her podcast. She also has her latest book out at ExitRichBook.com. You can find it there. You can also find it on her Seiler Tucker website as well. There's just so many ways to access the content that Michelle's already put out there. And obviously, there's phone numbers and such to contact Michelle and her firm directly, should you have a need to either buy or sell a business. I'm not kidding when I tell you I literally filled up pages of paper just listening to Michelle share all the things that go into selling a business and brokering and M&A. So, Michelle, I want to thank you for just dropping 30 minutes of straight knowledge on the listeners. It's awesome. The 6 Ps make total sense. And I think so many companies just miss the mark there sometimes in firing on all 6 of those. So
they do. And Michael, I'd like to tell everyone that additional bonuses they get when they buy Exit Rich, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can buy Exit Rich on Amazon or your favorite bookstore. However, at ExitRichBook.com, that's where all the additional value is. And so first and foremost, for I believe it's $24.79 plus shipping, we'll email you the digital download. We'll send the hardcover to your doorstep. It's also a great book for Christmas presents for all those entrepreneurs that you love and adore. And especially if you want them to exit their business. Let's say you're a wife and you want your husband to exit. But it's a great Christmas present. In addition to that, we have bonuses. So once you purchase Exit Rich, we'll ship the hardcover to your doorstep. We'll give you a lifetime membership into the Exit Rich Book Club. And there's video content with me doing all these different training and, over strategies and techniques that I've been teaching for the last 20 years in the trenches. Plus, there's documents to operate your business and documents to sell your company. So we have sample employee handbooks, non-competes, org charts. To sell your business, we have sample letter of intents. A lot of business owners have never seen a letter of intent. So we have sample LOIs, we have purchase agreements, we have due diligence checklist, we have data rooms, samples of data rooms and how they're set up. We have sample closing documents. Everything you need to operate or sell your business is there. And Michael, that's literally probably about a $50,000 value, because if you've ever hired an attorney before, I swear they charge by the word. And so all of that is there for your review. And then we also have Club CEOs, which is a membership that we started to really provide valuable content for entrepreneurs to build that sustainable, scalable, and sellable business. And that's all at ExitRichBook.com. Plus, go listen to my podcast, Exit Rich.
I was browsing Michelle's podcast, and it's not like, there's 5 episodes. There's tens, hundreds. There's so much out there, and it's just awesome that you're sharing the knowledge and putting it out there for people to get inspired and get informed so that they maximize their position. I appreciate you doing that on behalf of buyers and sellers everywhere. Yeah. So again, ExitRichBook.com or the SeilerTucker.com website for business services related to mergers and acquisitions. Michelle, thanks. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a blast.
Awesome.